You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever.
Stay hungry.
Hungry. Foolish. Stay hungry, stay foolish.
This is the E-Commerce All-Stars podcast, brought to you with heart by Nadimo.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining today's show with your host, Brandon Moscow, of course. And today I'm excited to have Raphael Romas. Sorry, I butchered your last name there, Raphael. Anyhow, I've got him on the line. He's a Fortune 500 unicorn whisperer and e-commerce strategist. Thanks for being on the show today, Raphael.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I was hoping that we could kind of kick it off with your giving a little bit of a background on yourself and what you're doing now, and just kind of let people know a little bit more about you and what you've accomplished and are accomplishing in the world today.
Sure. So it all started about 10 years ago when I started getting involved with SEO, and I really went in and learned everything I could about ranking websites for Google. And at that point, I realized that the part that I enjoy the most is not actually ranking them, but rather making them. And that's how I started my Los Angeles creative agency, Webbers, where we focus on web design and development. And in the 7 years that we've been in business, we've had the opportunity to work with anything from startups all the way to international multi-billion-dollar companies. And what I'm doing now is that I'm trying to further hone in into what I do best. And running an agency is one thing, but what I really do best is strategizing and implementing the strategy in the form of a website and a marketing campaign. So through Webbers and through my experiences, we've had a lot of successes in the beauty world, which I find particularly exciting. And so what I've done now is I started Generate Culture, through which we focus on specifically beauty brands in the e-commerce world, and we help them with their brand strategy, website, and marketing campaigns. So in a nutshell, that's roughly where we're at.
Right on. One of the things I mentioned at the beginning is Fortune 500 unicorn whisperer, and one of the things that in your bio it talks about basically applying the unicorn principle, as you call it, to finding your unique value proposition or value and messaging, and then how to really apply it. And I was thinking we could talk a little bit about that today. Would you mind elaborating a little bit on finding that unique value and messaging in your brand and how e-commerce companies could go about doing that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the best way to do that would be to start with a short story about one of our clients. The name is Mel Cosmetics, and it was started by Dana and Lori, which were two makeup artists working at Nordstrom. So they wanted to start a lipstick line because they felt that even though, obviously they were makeup experts and they had pretty much every makeup available, but they found that the market was missing on bolder colors that are not your typical red or shades of that, but rather something that really stands out, like a very, very heavy red or something like that. And they coined the term for those types of lipsticks of bold. And when they wanted to start their makeup line, they came to us, and we really tried to find how we can really showcase that. And what ended up happening is that they started posting a series of pictures where they would be using their prototypes, so their own new line, before it was even launched, really showing how it's different and how by using those products and those special colors, you're really standing out from the crowd. You're becoming bold, as they said. And we use that same logic for the website. So the website is very, very visual, all about showing those colors, showing women being bold, particularly themselves. They were the models. And what ended up happening is that they created such a strong buzz on social media about this upcoming brand that I'll never forget. It was 6 years ago or 5 years ago in May, and we were about to launch the website at midnight. So that was a brand new brand, brand new website, brand new product. And at 11:55, we did a very soft launch. We basically wanted to make sure that all the pieces were working properly. So we put the website up for 20 seconds, tested it, took it down, and then we were preparing ourselves for the midnight launch. And what happened is that within those 20 seconds, a couple of people were able to take screenshots and they posted them on social media saying something is happening, as if it was that huge event. And we are talking about a new brand here. The end result is that we launched at midnight, and 15 minutes later, everything was sold out. So I call that the unicorn principle. And the idea behind it is that if you really hone into what makes your brand unique, which we'll talk about today, then you are creating the need of your customers to buy your products. That's essentially what happens. They become your brand followers because of that one item that makes you very unique or makes your brand unique. And the end result of using that properly is selling out, or, obviously getting more sales, getting more conversions, increasing your return customers. So the two elements here are, number one, how do you find it? How do you find what's unique about your business? And we can break that up to many, many more sub-segments. And then, of course, how to use it. I guess we can start with how to find it. And I would say that you can find it literally anywhere. You can obviously look at your product, even though that might be risky, because what I find is that, excluding some very unique cases, most products would have other similar products on the market. Mm-hmm. So if I come out with a new cell phone, I wouldn't want to necessarily claim that it's so much better than another cell phone, because tomorrow there might be another cell phone that might beat me in terms of the speed or whatever. So that's not unique enough to really make my company stand out. But now when we look at potentially the founders or their story, or maybe why they started the company, or if there is a certain series of products that are all based on the same idea, then you might have something really special. I find that a lot of times the thing that makes a company special and the thing that can really create a following is when you look at why that company was started. Is there something behind this company besides the actual product that makes it more unique? A great example, Pura Vida bracelets. They started with the goal to create more jobs in, I don't even remember what country it's from, but it's such a good story because they are selling fashion and they're selling bracelets. They're nice, but there's nothing so unique about the actual bracelets, and yet the backstory makes it a really special product because they created a lot of jobs for an underdeveloped country. So that's a great example of finding your unique value proposition. And in this case, it's not necessarily the product, but rather the fact that you have a beautiful product and it's for a good cause, and using it everywhere you can. When you see how Pura Vida uses how Pura Vida markets itself, almost never would you see just a picture of a bracelet. But instead you would see a person making the bracelet, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense, and that's what I actually talk with a lot of my clients about as well, is in order to set yourself apart is what makes you different, like you mentioned. And when I say you, I'm talking about the company, not necessarily like that specific product, but everything that product embodies. So, for example, like you said, that what that bracelet represents is more about what person or the cult that you're forming is starting to buy in on. It's not that bracelet. You can get a million of those types of bracelets just about anywhere, but it's what that specific bracelet embodies and represents to that person who purchased it.
Exactly. Yes. And I find that after having worked with literally hundreds of companies, you can get a little bit of success without that. So you can decide that you're going to import something from China, sell it at a slightly lower price, and you'll make some sales. But what I find is that in order to become one of those big successes, you always need to have a unique value proposition. And we see this happen over and over again. You see beautiful products that just don't end up working because they don't have a strategy behind them to really create a brand. And they just focus too much on the product because they're too invested. This is very easy. I mean, it can happen very easily, and I think any business owners can relate to that. When you're creating something, you put so much time to it that you become very emotionally attached. And you do think that it's the best. And you think that because it is the best, everybody will understand that it's the best, and everybody cares that it's the best. The sad truth is that they don't. The bottom line is that being unique is one thing. You also have to be unique in a way that makes your audience care. And that's something that is super important. And the cell phone example is a great one. Notice how iPhones are by far the best-selling phone. I mean, Samsung is competing with it, but still they have the biggest piece of the pie. And nobody knows what the specs of an iPhone are. Nobody even cares. It's a really cool phone, right? When you see an iPhone commercial, never will you see anything about the processor speed or anything of these lines, because that's not what matters. Even if it has the best one, it doesn't even matter, because what does matter is that an iPhone commercial will give you an emotion. It will make you really want that phone because it makes you feel really good. And they do it. That happens with every single Apple product, right? So when you see the commercials, they show you happy people using the products to connect with their family or to, on a happy occasion, things like that. Versus what we used to see from technical product commercials 10 or 15 years ago, before Apple changed the game, where it was all about specs, right? You would just see a list of processor speed or RAM, things like that. Mm-hmm. So that really doesn't work anymore because it becomes too complicated. You need something that people really, really care about, and it will almost never be specific little specs. Nobody cares about that enough to really create a brand, I mean. It has to be something that hints to the emotion. That's what I find. It has to be something that will make people feel something rather than just a number that's better.
Right. So I've got a tricky question for you because I kind of lean a little bit in different directions depending obviously on the client, but you said you've worked with startups to Fortune 500 companies and what have you, but my question here, I guess, is a little bit in regards to the startup side of things. And a lot of the time, there's a quote out there that was about, basically, what I'm getting at, I guess, is that is it more important to create that brand, or is it more important to, get your first sales?
That's a great question. 100% to get your first sales. But I'm the first to say, even though I don't love to say this publicly, but I like to say that branding, when it comes to like a style guide or a logo, is almost irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that there is a distinct difference between branding and finding your unique value proposition. In other words, I think that if you're a startup, especially if you're a little bit, strapped for money,
Mm-hmm.
then I don't think you necessarily need to invest in a elaborate branding style guide. That can come later. But I do think you need to invest time and potentially money in doing your research and finding what your audience is really looking for. It could be that you're solving a problem. It could be that, you're always solving a problem essentially, but you need to really hone in and see what it is that you're actually solving. A lot of times it might look like you're solving one thing, but in reality, the end result is something else. Great example is a startup that I'm talking to right now. They have a technology that automates the workflow for restaurants and hotels. So for them, they could argue that they automate the workflow on restaurants and hotels, but in reality, the real problem, or rather the real benefit that you get from using that product, is that you can cut down labor costs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that really hits home, especially with hotels and restaurants that have a lot of staff. Finding a solution that will cut on labor costs means that they have money opened up to invest in other things like your product. So for them, that was a unique value proposition, that they're going to give the benefit of lowering costs through automation. So you want to use both, but you don't want to focus too much on the how. It's more about the why. So that's what I would say in terms of startup. 100%. You want to go as fast as possible to make that first sale or sales. Right. But I find that it's good to also spend time and find why people would buy your product and really use that as your pitch.
Right. I mean, then that makes a lot of sense to me, because what you're, and maybe I'm paraphrasing this incorrectly, so I would, I welcome you to correct me if I'm incorrect in what I'm hearing, but I guess what I'm hearing is it's important to get those first sales, but in its own sense, creating that value proposition is what's going to generate those sales and that overall buzz to generate more interest and whatnot. Kind of like what you've done with the lipstick company, where, before they even launched, or once they launched, they sold out within 15 minutes because they had such a culture for a company that hadn't even been born yet, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of like creating that culture that through your brand is what's going to drive those first sales. But branding as a way of, what you look like via logo or your packaging, that sort of thing, would be something that you would potentially spend more time on at a later date once you've started to generate that. Yeah, that all makes perfect sense to me, and I would agree.
So I would say that and I would actually, the one thing that I would tweak from what you said is that I think that you can make your first sales without really focusing on what we just talked about. But your second sales or your third sales or your 1,000th sale, that's where it's going to get harder. Because I think that immediately you have a circle, you have an idea, assuming that you did your research and that you are actually, solving a problem. Some people are going to find it and some people are going to buy it. But in order to actually make it a successful company and to grow past a certain level, it needs to be more of a solution rather than a product. It needs to actually really appeal to a certain audience in a very, very strong way. And that typically happens through emotion and by solving their problem rather than just explaining how you're going to solve the problem. I think that's the big distinction. Buying for the why instead of the what.
Buying for the why instead of the what. That's very well said. And then so, that's really cool. what, I guess I'm just trying to think of what else we can build on there, because you were mentioning so how do you go about kind of getting that out there and getting the word out?
Yeah.
Sense.
So I think that the best answer is that you want to get it out there in any possible way you can think of. Obviously, you're going to have your website. One really important thing here is that when you're building your website, you have to think of your unique value proposition more rather than your product. And the two might be the same, right? We did another product launch for a company called Pre-Heals. What they do is that they have a spray that you, typically women, but also used by men. You spray it in the back of your heel, and then it prevents blisters. So that's a very utility-based product. But by default, the product here is the solution. So there are cases where the two will intercept, right? It's not always that, my product is not also the solution and I need to sell the solution. Sometimes the two are the same thing. But if they're not, then your key focus should be your unique value proposition. And you do that through your website. When I land on your website, I don't necessarily need to see your product or your price unless if that's your UVP, but rather show me what really makes this company special, what makes this company different than the other few hundred companies that are similar and that I can find. Second thing is your marketing and advertising. So when you do a marketing campaign, and we see that from the big companies all the time, right? This is not science necessarily. I mean, it kind of is a science, but it's not something that's so new. When you see a commercial for a big company, when a big company runs a campaign, almost never will they call the campaign the product name. They'll call it something cool. Hashtag be bold. Nothing about the product. Because what that does is that it can also generate a buzz that users can catch on, and then you get the other amazing effect of finding your unique value proposition, which is user-generated content. People like to be sold from other people rather than from companies. And if you do create a brand following, then people will try to sell your product for you. So yeah, back to what we were saying about how you can use it, market it. But don't market the product, market the unique value proposition. And you can market it on Facebook, find the audience that you're solving the problem for and find them wherever they are. Facebook, Instagram, Google, retargeting is a good one for sure. You want to have pixels on your website that will track your visitors and then follow them wherever they go, because the more they see that unique value proposition, the more they learn to follow. There is a statistic somewhere, I don't recall off the top of my head, maybe you know it, that says that they found that in order to make a purchase, you have to see the brand X amount of times. Yeah. And I think that depending on what you're selling, that number might be different. The bigger the purchase, the more credibility you need to have on the brand that you're buying from. But I find that the more touch points you can have with your audience online, the better. So quite frankly, I don't discriminate. If I can market somewhere, I will. And I'll test it. That's one thing that's super important. You always want to test so you can see how things are performing, because I would never say that, product XYZ would never work for LinkedIn ads, even if it seems an obvious fact to state. Test it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Use a small budget so that, you don't want to waste your marketing dollars, but you do want to prioritize. You do want to go where you think will have the most effect, which will vary based on your industry and your product. But you do want to test as much as you can. You do want to try as many things as you can so that you can find the thing that works best and then really scale your efforts towards that platform.
That makes perfect sense. Excellent. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to you for any final words of wisdom, and then how people can get a hold of you.
Great. I guess final words of wisdom would be, only because I come from the web design agency world. I would say that a good 70% of the clients that reach out to us, when we ask them, why do you want to make a new website? Their answer is that they want to get a fresh new look. That's not a good answer. I like to say that there always has to be a reason behind an investment that you make for your business. And a fresh new look, just because you want to get a fresh new look, is just not a good enough answer. Instead, think about or go to someone that can help you think about how your website could be better or how your brand could be better. And I find that 9 times out of 10, and that's an actual number, 9 times out of 10, people miss out on what their actual benefit that they're offering is through their product or service. So that's what you need to find. And if you don't see it or if you need help finding it, then that's what I do. And the agency that I would refer you to is Generate Culture at generateculture.com. And what I do is I help companies, brands ranging from startups all the way to, Fortune 500 or bigger, find their unique value proposition, build a website around it, and then create a full marketing campaign so that they can really hone in and reach their audience with that unique value proposition. And the end result is you get a brand following, sales, repeat sales, and you're really creating a brand that can then extend to however you want to extend it. That's the key.
Excellent. Well, thanks for all your valued insight here today. I think the audience has gotten some great value out of this, and hopefully they were listening very closely because I think the UVP, the unique value proposition, and the overall messaging around that is absolutely the key. And it's really what's going to drive not only your initial sales, but your ongoing sales. And so thank you for your time on that today, Raphael, and best of luck to you with your new venture here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever.
Stay hungry.
Hungry. Foolish. Stay hungry. Stay foolish.
This is the E-Commerce All-Stars podcast, brought to you with heart by Nadimo.com.